Hi, good afternoon. This is Mike Archick, the Director of Virtual Infrastructure at Fandotech. I'm here to talk to you today about business continuance and disaster recovery for your virtual operating environment. I just want to go over some topics of the discussion. Really want to hit upon the urgency of having an actionable DR plan. You know, it's not enough to just have one, but one that is actionable in the sense that you know, at the time of disaster or when that strikes, is to have the ability to actually have that be functional and working. Go over some of the features and benefits of having a virtual solution, as well as the pros and cons to subscribing versus building your own solution. And kind of like dig a little deeper versus kind of like having your own as well as subscribing to an existing. So why DR and why BC? Really, why now? You know, it's like over, especially us in New England, over the last 2+ years, we've seen our own share of weather-related incidents. 2010 we had heavy snowfall that crippled some cities and small towns. 2010. Like, who'd have thought that there'd be tornadoes in downtown Springfield? And just recently with Hurricane Sandy inundating Long Island Sound and punishing some of New York and coastal Connecticut, as well as lots of rainfall and down power lines and such. So it's always prominent. It just happens to be that in New England we've seen our own share of these things in just recent times. So I would pretty much pose the question to you is ask yourself, like, how would your systems and processes survive this type of scenario? There's hardware failure and, for example, like on-site backup and recovery and restoration capabilities. You have the ability to restore that data if you're on-site and that data repository is on-site. Off-site backup. So say, for example, you have, an issue with a system and you need to recover that from a cloud backup or such, or having the old adage of sending tapes home with your admins, or have like an Iron Mountain type setup where you're shipping your tapes out. There's always that offsite capability. Huge issues when it comes to data loss. Do you have a disaster recovery scenario where you can actually recover that data? And then really the big one is like that huge unplanned infrastructure outage. Your business is out. Like, how do you get that? How do you get your business back to a running state so you're actually able to conduct business once again? Things to know about for how you're actually accomplishing a DR or BC strategy. Things you already know. So your current environment. What your users are, or who your users are, what systems they use on a daily basis. And kind of like what's the operational model of business as usual. So you've identified your critical applications and services. Like, everybody knows that everybody has those critical systems that your business can't do without. There's also other pieces. Know who your stakeholders are, people that are held ultimately responsible for that business, whether if it's everyday running or even in a time of disaster. And then one of those other things that people don't necessarily look at, administrators, directors of infrastructure, is know what those limitations are. Some systems are built around disaster recovery, built around high availability. Some systems automatically have an inherent capability to be more easily disaster recovered, or lend themselves into a business continuance plan. And then the next thing is really things you don't know, things that like aren't part of your day-to-day activities. So think about it, like, how fast is your infrastructure growing? You might be servicing 50, 60 users today, but you don't know, maybe in 2 years or 3 years your infrastructure is going to grow to support 100 users. Maybe there's an acquisition or such, and your systems need to expand as your business expands. Another huge thing is, will you always have staff available and expertise, in-house expertise, to be able to help out in the case of a disaster? Are your admins capable of some higher functioning when it comes to higher end systems, or the ability to build highly available systems and such? Are your current the current recovery measures tested and verified? You know, it's not enough to just say, hey, I back up to tape, or I back up to disk, or I have something off host or off site that I have a repository. It's like, you know, if you need it, can you recover from it? Can you restore from that tape? Is that tape good? Can you recover from that disk? Has it been tested? Do you use it on an enough basis so that you know for a fact that when you need it, it's available? Another big item that's shown up, as I would say in the last 5 to 6 years, is huge work from home initiatives. Do you need to be on a local workstation, or can you be remote and get in via, you know, some sort of remote access solution? And one of the huge things when you look at this from a whole is, do you know all your possible failure points? Like, everybody always talks about having that one thing that's the weakest link. Maybe it's the single node web server or such, and if that web server goes down, you can't take orders. So, you know, taking into consideration how to more properly define those scenarios to know what things are outside of the failure points. Make sure you can you know, shore those up and make sure that those pieces are in play for you know, especially when it comes to when you're in a disaster situation, of getting those pieces up and back and online. You don't know when the next disaster is going to happen. Sure, if it's a news broadcast with a weather-related issue or something, but, you know, earthquakes happen on the fly. Not necessarily New England, but, you know, they can happen around here, especially outside of other geographies as well. It could easily be a power outage, and you have no ability, you know, you have no control over the power. You have no control over those utilities. So you don't know when that's going to happen. You know it'll affect you at some point, but you don't know what the actual disaster will be. But when you're down, you're down. So really, what are your options? From the lowest common denominator down. So on-site backups only. You know, they work great, they do what they need to, but they're only covers data while you're on site. You know, you're not gonna, your local recovery plan isn't gonna help you somewhere else. If you're not taking your data off site, you have no ability to access that data unless it's actually shipped to your site. Build your own recovery facility. You know, it sounds great. It sounds like you know, it's one of those things that everybody always says. It's like, oh, we'll get a secondary data center, or we'll work with another company and do a shared data facility with like a partner. It's cost prohibitive. You're talking about utilities, internet circuits coming in and out, power backup, power generation when it comes to complete utter failure from the utility system, having that generator on site, getting the contracts in place for getting the you know, getting fuel necessary to keep that generator up and running whenever there is no power to be gotten. You're talking a huge capital expense. You're owning another building. It's like these are huge things that some companies can't afford, and some companies it's just cost prohibitive. You know, another option is co-locate your DR or BC environment. You know, it's along the same lines as you know, building your own facility. It's you're building systems in a shared space. But ultimately, those those systems, they have to be like to like for what you've got in-house. So if they have your capital expenses and capital costs grow as your production environment grows, you know, and the other piece of that is self-manage. It's like you're not getting any help from anybody except for the fact that you've got your systems in a different location. So it's still managed by your own internal IT staff. And really, what the kicker is on this side is our service that we have in-house is called Survive. It's a fully managed, hosted disaster recovery business continuance service. So one of the things I want to do is actually step through what is Survive. So Survive is a pay-per-use DR environment. You could almost consider it DR as a service. So you pay per use and you scale as needed. You know, you don't necessarily need to have everything protected. You know, as I was saying before, in the things you know what your critical assets are. Maybe you only protect those critical assets. You don't actually carry over every single system that you've got in place. There's no upfront capital costs. We're talking about DR as a service. You're paying for what you need. So you're not buying the hardware. You're not buying the data center space. You're paying, you know, it's a per use configuration. The availability and the security all built around the fact that we've got the data centers, the availability, you've got 24/7 support from our help desk, our TAC, and we have the redundant circuitry, we've got the redundant power, we've got all the battery, we've got all the generator, all on the back end, already taken care of, and is completely included with that pay-per-use per machine. Really hits upon the support. You need us, we're here. Like I said before, 24/7. One of the great benefits is non-disruptive integrated testing. As much as the the testing is done during the initial implementation, we're working with the customer to get their systems replicated over. When we're doing a test, we're actually doing the test in the recovery facility. We're not failing things over. We're not taking the production environment down. It's completely non-disruptive in our data center in the Survive environment. And the great thing about it, it's a scheduled event. We're working with the customer on that. And like I said before, it's a two times per year working with the customer post-implementation. We do support multiple hypervisors. We're not a single hypervisor shop, so we have the ability to kind of service those environments based on what those customer requirements are. So just to kind of give you a logical overview from a top-down approach, like I said before, it's 24/7 coverage from our side. We are doing backup validation, recovery, and replication verification. Backup failure via the replication strategy. We have the ability to change RPOs and RTOs for how often we replicate the data versus how much data change we want to actually take in at once. We have the full data recovery and restoration support. So on-site, we have the expertise in-house, as well as the help desk, the tech to be able to call in an issue. Two different types of services that we've got is we've got an appliance-based replication as well as storage-based replication. So from the appliance-based replication, we could pull in anything from a VMware-based virtual machine, a Citrix-based virtual machine, or a Linux or Windows server. I won't get into the exact details of which Linux distributions are supported, but they're definitely all the major Linux distributions, your SUSEs, your Red Hats, et cetera, et cetera. We'll pull those in across the WAN, and those on our side, from the Fandotech side, become virtual machines in either the VMware or Citrix space. Of course, if you're a VMware customer, you're being pulled into a VMware environment. If you're a Citrix customer, you're being pulled into a Citrix environment. The Windows Linux environment really is kind of dependent upon supported operating system versions on top of those hypervisors. Also below that, like I was saying before, there is storage-based replication. Depending on the type of storage you have in-house, we can extend out our own internal storage area network and our storage devices to be able to be a replication destination for those virtual machines sitting on that storage device. Just a little bit extra detail on the appliance and the array-based replication. As you can see from the first line, the array-based replication we are extending out to vSphere standard and above. Appliance-based replication is pretty much any vSphere customer, whether you're Essential, Standard, and then Zen Server, we are solely appliance-based replication, and physical Windows and Linux, we are appliance-based as well. So it's great that we, from the disaster recovery, like I was saying before, as a service, it's an individual pay-as-you-go product, depending on which types of physical or virtual machines, depending on what type of hypervisor, as well as a destination hypervisor. On the other side, we have a solution that'll fit those, fit those requirements. Detail out one of those other things. Like as we were saying before, it's you can build your own colocation or purchase hardware for your own colocation facility. You can go down the path of building your own facility. So really, it's like, what's the question of why subscribe to a service versus building? Like think about that. There's no upfront capital costs. You're not paying for the circuits. You're not paying for the data center space or the co-location space. You're paying solely per virtual machine or physical. It's scalable. You build it as you go. If you have to replicate or if you need to replicate 10 virtual machines today and 60, 4 months from now, that changes. It's not like you're changing your physical infrastructure in a disaster recovery facility. You're just solely replicating additional data to our Survive environment. It's cost effective. How simple would it be if you can say DR is paid for the same way as a utility? So your cable bill, or your phone lines, or your power. Okay, you got another line item there that's disaster recovery. It's a number that you know exactly the same every month until you change what needs to be replicated, whether you're adding things to be replicated or subtracting items that need to be replicated. Say you decommission a host, yeah, your price goes down. Huge item, staff augmentation. You're not dealing with the fact that your IT staff or your have to be a virtualization experts on disaster recovery. You're using our staff. The disaster, the DR plan, the business continuance, setting that stuff up, all up front during the initial project of onboarding the customer. We're on it, getting that configured. When we're doing the disaster recovery testing, that's working with the staff. It's not something that you're off on your own having to do. Part of that is actually getting that, getting the validation to make sure that, okay, host 1 starts first because host 2 needs resources of host 1. That's stuff that's done right up front during the initial planning and implementation. And of course, testing and validation, maybe there's been some new idiosyncrasies that need to be taken into consideration for how that failover actually gets executed. And that's stuff that that's how it's actionable. That's how it's going to work. And one of those other big things when it comes to some of those customers is from the data center facilities, it's not necessarily just the data center. We have to routinely submit to SSA 16 Type 2 an audit. A lot of our customer base actually has those requirements. Some of them don't, but ultimately they're sitting in the same configuration of a data center. So customer with the most requirements, everybody else below is getting those as well. And anything that's not anything that's not directly answered here, feel free, shoot me an email. As you see on the screen, it's marchick@fandotech.com.